Okay, so the topic today is love, everybody's favorite topic. But what does love really mean? It's one of the most obscure words that very few people know what it means. Maybe because we never learned about it. Where do you learn about love? You don't learn about it in school. You don't learn about it from your parents.
we could learn it from our parents.
Yeah, but in many cases you learn what it's not, maybe, from the parents. Because how do we know? You could learn it by viewing your parents if they truly love each other. But in most cases, very few people actually have love. So very few people could actually teach what love is. And the question is, whether love is something that you need to know what it is in order to get to it, or is it something that when you have it, you feel it? You understand the question? Is love something you need to know in order to have it? Or no, you fall into it somehow, and then you know it when you have it. Interesting question.
Yeah, very, definitely.
Well, it's a trick question, because if you don't know what love is, you'll never know even if you have it. Because you might think you have it, but it's not love. It could be something else. It's a feeling that you have, but it's not necessarily going to be love, right? Because love is something that you have to actually work on to get. It's not something that just comes. And this is one of the big misconceptions. People think, yeah, we'll be in a relationship, and they start throwing out love, I love you, even though when they're divorced, they're going through a divorce, love you. They say you can't really get to love if you don't work on love. And in order to work for it, you have to know what it is. So that's why we're here, to explain this big obscure concept of love, what it is, so we know what to work for. So, something that takes work. Now, before we get into it, so we have to really know what love isn't. Or we have to know something about love. We may not know what love is right away, but we have to first define certain features of love. So I'm going to quote the Mishnah in Ethics of the Fathers. Mishnah says the following statement. Any love which is dependent on something, when the something ceases, the love ceases. Any love which is not dependent on anything will never cease. The Mishnah continues, what is the love which is dependent? The love of Amnon for Tamar. We'll explain who these two people were. And which is not dependent? The love of David and Jonathan. So the Mishnah says basically there's two types of love. One love that is eternal, and one is love that's temporary. Let's call them names. Real love is the one that's eternal, and you can call it fake love, or not real love if you prefer, which is temporary. So one of the common questions that that we need to ask is, we see many times people enter a relationship or a marriage, and they feel they're in love, they say they love. A year later, sometimes less, sometimes more, that love turns to hate. They hate each other's guts, or at the least, they don't love each other. So a question we have is that possible? Is love something that can turn into hate? You could say, yes. Yeah, love can die, and in place of that love, hate. Or there's a second way. You say, no. The hate at the end reveals that there was never love to begin with. Because real love can't turn to hate. Which do you think it is?
Second one.
You think it's the second one?
I think it gets replaced because that person that you love so much could do something so painful to you, so hurtful to you.
But if they loved you, if both of you loved each other, I agree with you that if only one person loves the other and the other didn't love them, they can actually hurt them. Or, okay, but I'll take what you're saying. Maybe, yes. Why don't you consider this? Can a parent ever stop loving a child? Even if a child rebels against them?
Yeah, I think they can.
It's very hard.
It's hard.
It's very hard because when you love someone, even the bad things that they do,
right,
you'll you'll overlook it. Right? This is one of the qualities that the Mishnah is telling us. Real love is eternal. It can't be temporary. If it's temporary, it's not real love. It's a love that depends on something. So, what is that love that's temporary then? What is it? If it's not real love, then what is it? It's not nothing. There's something. It is a type of love, but this is what we call self-love, or egoic love, if you will, meaning the love of oneself. Many people think that they love another person, when in fact they don't really love them. They love what the other person does for them. For example, the story about this rabbi who asked this man, "What do you love?" He says, "I love fish." He says, "If you love fish, why do you cut the fish and eat it? Why don't you make it an aquarium? Why don't you make it something nice?" You don't love the fish. You love yourself, but you love what the fish gives you. So many people take this concept of love and they say, "I love you," or "I love this." What they actually mean is, "I love what it does for me." They don't love the other person for who they are. They love what they get from the other person. And this is how love can turn into hate. Because if you didn't really love that other person, you just loved them as long as they provided you with pleasure, and you loved what they gave you, and you loved how they spoke to you, and you loved how they treated you, whatever. When that pleasure turns to pain, and they become like a source of pain to you, that love turns to hate. Because now, you're just a source of pain in my life. I can't stand you. You're horrible. This relationship is horrible. What happened to that love? It never was. That wasn't real love. That was love of oneself. And now you should know that most people start off with this type of love, because this is how we're born. We're born into the state of ego. We're born into the state of taking, of caring about ourselves and thinking about ourselves. It's natural. But to stay in that means that you'll never really reach real love. Real love is breaking out of the self-love and entering what's called a state of real love, which we'll talk about. What is that? But for the time being, we have to know that most people start off a relationship with fake love, which is selfish love, egoic love, love of the self, and the other person is just a means to get that, to basically get our needs. They provide our emotional needs, they provide our physical needs, our psychological needs, and that's okay in the beginning. But if you get stuck on that level, you'll never really reach real love, which is a higher level, which is eternal. So the Mishnah gives us condition number 1. How do we know if love is real or not?
If it doesn't depend on anything.
Right? But what is the time factor, that indication if it's real love or not?
If it's eternal.
Eternal. Love cannot turn to hate. So therefore, this is another important point that people need to realize, that many people are afraid to step into a relationship because, wait, who knows if we'll love each other 5 years from now? Maybe we need to make a prenup. Maybe we need to get... This is all true of self-love. But real love, which is something you work to, there's no taking chances. Real love doesn't cease. It's eternal. If anything, it even grows. You got a question?
Yeah. So let's say two people are in a relationship and this fake love turns into resentment and hate. Is there a way to turn that into real love?
Yes, there's always a way to turn any negative energy into positive energy when you insert awareness into the relationship. When you start realizing, whoa, this is how I am. And she says, wow, this is how I am. How do we actually do it right? And you start changing. You don't change the other person, you change yourself. But there's always ways to change. Unfortunately, though, many people are not looking to grow. Many people just say, you grow. You leave me alone. Is that okay? Sometimes, yes. Sometimes one person growing rubs off on the other person. So they may not initiate a process of growth, but if the other person does, that awareness will spill over into the other person and they'll grow too. So you have to have a partnership, but it doesn't mean everyone has to lead the way. It's enough at least that one person leads the way. But definitely things can always change. There's never a time where, unless you give up, unless the two people give up, or there's a dysfunction on such a high level that it's, it needs like professional treatment, and the person can't even be in control of themselves. When there's total loss of self-control, then that might be too difficult to reverse. So that's condition number one. Condition number two, the Mishnah tells us, is what is the distinction between real love and fake love? Is real love doesn't depend on something. The fake love does. Now, what does this mean? How can you have any love that doesn't depend on anything? Surely you need something. How can it be anything? What, it's up in the air? So why did these two people connect? What connected them? That's something. There has to be something. What does the Mishnah mean, real love that doesn't depend on anything? One of the explanations is something means a mutual need. In other words, usually two people are connected to each other because they have a need. One likes the looks of the other likes the fact that this person has money. That could be very superficial. We could go higher. Emotional needs. One person likes the fact that the other person is social while they're shy, and the social person likes the shy person because they listen to him. Or it could be one wants a girl who's educated, because in his family, not everyone was educated, and the other person admires family warmth and values or whatever in the other person. These are called emotional needs, okay? But nevertheless, they're needs. Now, if two people are connected because they have a mutual need, what's going to happen later, maybe?
Once they achieve the need.
The needs change. Because as circumstances in life change, so do your needs. So if it depends on something, when that something ceases to be, so will that love. This is again another sign or indication of egoic love, love of the self. They give me what I need. We have mutual needs. Now, I'm not saying you don't have needs. You do have needs. But if that's what's holding it, it's a risky business. The Mishnah tells us real love transcends needs. Real love doesn't depend on any needs. Real love comes from a state of wholeness, a state of being when you're not connected to the other person just because you need them, but because you actually are part of the same thing. It's beyond needs. It's something that can go beyond that. We always have our needs, which actually brings us to a very important point that many people think that once they meet another person, their problems are going to be over, they're going to be complete. Because we hear that all the time, that, oh, you're incomplete if you're single, if you're not married, which is true in some sense, but that doesn't mean that if you're incomplete and then once you meet that other person, oh, you're automatically going to be complete. No, you could be suffering from something else afterwards. You can't need another person in order to make yourself whole. You got to become whole by yourself. When you're in a relationship or not in a relationship, you have to be whole. Right? And when you meet another person and you see that you guys connect, you don't get married because you need each other, but because a connection has been made on a higher level than need.
How do you know the connection is made?
When you feel, well, so in Judaism, you're not really approaching marriage on this high level of self-awareness. You're really commanded to get married. So it's a long-term plan. And if two people have this long-term plan together to grow together into love, they'll reach it. It's rare that a person can actually grow into self, and transform themselves before marriage and reach it. But the point is that their needs they're not doing it for just personal needs. There's something higher here at work. A mitzvah is something higher. It's not something like emotional need or physical need. You're doing it because you know it's the right thing to do, and that person is going to be with you a partner in life. So that's already transcending the very, very selfish, egoic need. That's a start. Real love will come about when two people actually merge into one being. That's really the definition of love. Definition of love is not egoic love, that we both fulfill each other's needs. You give me what I want, I give you what you want. That's using each other. You will need to fulfill each other's needs, but your connection can't really depend on that. The real definition of love is when you reach a level of being that is one. When two people become one being, and we'll explain how they get to that level, that's beyond needs. That's like, just like you have a relationship with yourself, you're one being, the other person becomes a part of you, and you become a part of them. And this is what the Torah says, V'hayu levasar echad. And it says regarding Adam and Eve, and they shall become one flesh. Because Adam and Eve, the first man and first woman separated from each other, their natural state is to be glued together. One being. Not two beings. One being. And that's really part of the universal purpose of creation, is to return to that natural state of being, of wholeness. That's not just needs. That's a totally different level of being. You're merged in with your other half, and it's like you retrieve part of yourself back to yourself, and you become a whole being. That's what the Mishnah means, a love that doesn't depend on anything. It's not dependent on needs. It's something bigger. It's merging into being.
So is there a checklist, Rabbi, like Lo Aleinu? You know, a lot of people go into marriages thinking that this is it, this is the one, Lo Aleinu, but like, is there a specific checklist people could have to make sure that they're not going into something for the wrong reasons, and making sure that this is the person that they're going to become glued to?
The only thing you could really do is, the checklist is that you're objective, okay? And being objective is very important. You could lose that objectivity many times when you become physically involved with someone. You tend to overlook, you don't even see anything, you just see what you want to see. But you have to know that the person you're entering this relationship with is not only is reliable, that you could rely on them to be by your side, that they're, even if they mean to be by your side, that they're not emotionally weak or suffer from a, family dysfunction that will make it very difficult for them to handle family life. And if there is such a thing, you should know about it.
I have a question.
Sure.
So there are people who are emotionally weak, and they do have dysfunctions in their family.
Most people do.
Right. And we have our soulmate. What I heard is that we have our soulmate set out in our life 40 days before we were even born.
That's the first zivug. Right. Zivug Rishon, it's called. What is Zivug Rishon? Some say it's first marriage. Some say it's your soulmate that intended to, but you're not necessarily going to marry them. Yeah, there is such a thing. That means that you meet them. It doesn't mean that it's going to go smooth. In other words, there's also free will. Two people could make the perfect decision at the point of marriage and say, yes, they're right for each other. A year later, they could screw it up. It doesn't mean that if you marry a soulmate, your marriage will be successful, because there's still free will. If you're egotistical, if you don't like taking the responsibility, if things go wrong and no one actually says, hey, let's fix it, I want to make it right, it could be a disaster. That doesn't mean that the shidduch was wrong, that they weren't meant for each other. They could be totally meant for each other, but they screwed up. So many people are like this. Some people marry the right way. They had the checklist, everything was great. Okay? Along the way, bad decision after bad decision was made, ignoring signs, and letting things just slip. The worst thing you can do is when you see that the other person, you don't see their true feelings towards you. They could be suffering because of you, or they don't have feelings towards you like they should. Now, if you are completely oblivious to that, and you just let things go, and you bring another kid, and another kid, there's a buildup of negative tension, and then it could build up to such an extent that the other person already is very difficult for them to break out of that. So you always need to work on marriage when you're married. It's a process. Now, some people handle it better than others, and some people don't. But it's definitely true that one of the traits, the most important trait that you can look for in another person, is the trait of unselfishness, of being able to think about the other person and not put themselves first. If somebody puts themselves first, then you should be able to see that right away. It manifests itself in the little things, not in the big things that people say, because many people speak with big slogans. They want to save the world. They say, if I had $1 million, what would I do? I'd give it all to charity. Yeah, okay. That doesn't mean that that's who they really are. So you need to pay attention to their actions and not to what they say, and you need to see if they're actually following up with what they say they believe in, to see that they're trustworthy, reliable, competent, and not just living in some type of fantasy world. Because the fantasy world many people get caught up in, you need to check stability. If a person is unstable before they met you, they will continue to be unstable after they meet you, unless they make a huge change in life. So all these things are very important. Stability, knowing what they want, doing what needs to be done to get to what they want, not just talking about things, but really checking a person's actions. Going back to the definition of love, we said love is a state of connectedness. It's a state of being merged into someone. And now the question is actually, there's a few different insights into this idea that that's how Judaism views love as oneness. One of the things that we do in the chuppah, one of the blessings of the Sheva Brachot in the chuppah is we bless, I believe it's the third blessing, which says Yotzer HaAdam, creator of man. That's a third blessing in the chuppah, I believe. And that blessing basically is saying whoever is making that blessing in the chuppah is actually blessing them as if they were just born right now. Yotzer Adam, right? So one of the questions that's asked is, shouldn't this blessing be made? When should it really be made?
At birth.
At birth, yeah. At the hospital, or at the brit. Why do they wait until now? The answer is, according to what we said, is now there's one person. Until now, there were two halves. They weren't really living. Why? Because everything was selfish. Everything was for me, for me, for me, for me. Now they met the other half. Now they enter a state of completeness where they can actually be whole and complete. Now they're Adam in the full sense of the word Adam. So that's why we make this blessing during the chuppah to tell us that now you guys are not anymore two eyes. You're now one person. So you have to start acting in such a way. And that's really the foundation of reaching love, is to understand, wait a second, we're one person. Am I treating this person the way I want to be treated? Am I treating them with respect, with love? Am I making them happy? And it's always putting that at the front of your thoughts and actions, to be thoughtful of them all the time. Until you reach a level where this is so natural, where just like you don't have to think about your own interests and what makes you happy, you think about them in the same way that you think about yourself. It takes time, but that's a process. Now, how do you reach this level? Well, we have before we get to that, we have another remez, allusion, that love in Judaism is oneness. From where? The word ahava. What's the numerical value of the word ahava? So I'll make it easier. Aleph 1, Bet 2, Hey 5,
7. Oh wait.
And another Hey, another 5. Altogether, 13. The same numerical value of the word echad, 1. In other words, ahava is oneness. It's all in the word. That's what ahava is. when the Torah says whether it's loving God or loving a woman or a man, it means be one with them. Reach a state of being. So love is not a feeling. Many people think love is a feeling. Love is not a feeling. Love is not a thought. Love is a state of being in oneness. And you will know it. You will definitely know it when you're in it because you're aware of your own being. Love is oneness. It's nothing other than that. So let's just summarize this. We said earlier that love is eternal. Love is not something temporary. Fake love is. Egoic love is temporary. You really can't rely on it. It changes as things in life change. And besides that, love is not fulfillment of needs. Yeah, that's egoic love. Real love transcends just fulfilling each other's needs. It's connecting, it's beyond something. And what is that? It's a state of being. It's a state of oneness where you merge into one and you're in this level of being that's considered love. As indicated in the word, ahava, one. How to reach that level? That's also in the word. The word ahava contains the shorish word hav, which means, in Aramaic, to give. By giving the other person, whether it's giving your attention, giving your care, giving your money, giving your time, whatever you need to give and invest in them, the word probably is better, is to invest in them, you will be able to reach that level of being called love. And why? Simply because you are a taker. You're stuck in the egoic love stage. How do you break out of the egoic love? By focusing on the other person. Now, Rav Dessler explains the way that this works. How does giving... So first of all, we need to know. Giving is an action. Okay? It's not a feeling. Many people think, oh, when you love, if you love, you will give. No. It's right to say, if you will give, you will love. It's not right to say, if you love, you will give. Because giving leads to love. Love is an outpouring of giving. Giving is the action. And that you can control. The result, the consequence will be love. Okay? So that's very important because Judaism says that actions is something that you control. You can't control the way you feel. You can't control your mindset, your nature. Well, maybe you can control it, but that's very hard. But you can control your decisions and actions. So if you decide, I'm going to start giving them, and I have to study them. What makes that other person happy? What can I do to make them happy? What am I doing that's making them unhappy? This is all a process of giving. You can control. You can make those decisions. That will lead you to love. Now, why? So see how Rav Dessler explains it. Rav Dessler says like this. Since our nature is to be egotistical and we always think about ourselves, okay? By giving the other person, what do? We take a part of us and we invest it in them. So we still love ourselves, but now they're becoming part of us. So we love them like we love ourselves. It's not that we break out of ourselves. We're still egotistical, but now they become a part of us because we're actually giving them. It's like, for example, when a person invests money, whether it's in a charity or he volunteers, he feels connected to that cause. He feels like, oh, it's part of me. It's like me. That's how you give people ownership of something. You make them invest in it, volunteer or give money. They become one with it. Because when you give to something, you feel connected. It's part of you is in there. Same thing with people. You will love them once you invest in them. You invest your time, you invest your attention, you become connected to them. So giving is actually the only way to reach this level of oneness and break out of what's called the egoic love.
The actual physical giving.
It doesn't have to be physical. It's even thinking about them. Thinking about them before you come in home from work and thinking about, making yourself ready to see them. How can I make them feel better when I come in? That's giving. Because you're putting them right now in front of your own self. And obviously to be able to give, you have to be happy with yourself. You cannot start giving a person if you are in a bad state. If you are suffering, you can only give more suffering. You can't give goodness, because what do you have to give? If you're not happy, all you could do is, you can't make someone more happy happier than what you make yourself happy. So when you're in a state of wholeness, then you can actually give. You can't give when you are suffering. So you got to, find out what is making you suffer, and deal with that. But when things are good, you have to share, and you have to think about that other person, and think about what's going to be good for them, what's going to make them feel good. And this is really, we're getting to the main point of how, the word for this type of relationship in which people are thinking of each other and feeling each other, the word is empathy. One of the hardest things for couples to build is empathy. What is empathy? Empathy is knowing how the other person feels and caring about it. It's like, just like you feel your pain, you're able to feel their pain. Just like you have fear and you know what you're afraid of, you understand what they're afraid of. Just like you know what you need and you makes you happy, you know what they need and what they lack. That's empathy. That takes work. Giving is able to produce this level of empathy, of connecting you to that other person, to their world. Most couples who suffer from dysfunction, I know certainly people who I've tried to help out, they share one thing in common. They don't have empathy for each other. They're disconnected from each other. Everyone is busy doing their own thing in their own world. And because of that lack of empathy, there's not a healthy line of communication, and they don't even know how to get out of it. And you have to teach them how to get out of it. Empathy requires building. It doesn't come alone. Because our nature is to be selfish, egotistical. That's our nature. And money is not going to make it better. It could make you more selfish. It could bring out the worst in you. Having things is not going to solve the problem. It's work. It's working on yourself, on really taking that selfish nature and building empathy and seeing the other person, just like you see yourself. So, to summarize, love is a state of connectedness, a state of being. It's not what we mean when we say, I love you, I love you. The worst thing is when people start using this word, I love you, before they make any commitment to each other. I love you, I love you. When you hear that, you should be aware. That's danger already, because they have a false sense of love. You first have to know what's real love. Don't use that word haphazardly, love, unless you really know what it means. Halavai, you should reach a level where you could just say to someone, I love you. You wouldn't even need to say it, because you're in that state. It's like you don't tell yourself, I love you. It's a little bit crazy, right?
I do.
Well, but the real thing takes time and work, and it's a state of oneness, a state of connectedness. It doesn't change. It's eternal. It's beyond needs, and it comes through giving, which builds empathy. When you have empathy, that's the first step to achieving this state of connectedness. Without empathy, you're not connected to each other, and if you're not connected to each other, you're not in love. You're never going to reach that oneness. So you have to connect to each other through empathy, and then from that you grow into being one being. So, B'ezrat Hashem, we should all be zoche to really achieve this and work on it and have a partner in life that really will want to merge into us and us into them. And B'ezrat Hashem, this should only bring blessing to the whole house and to the whole of Klal Yisrael.
Amen.